So today I want to talk to you about heart blocks. And disclaimer here is that this video is not going to be talking about a lot of mechanisms or causes slash etiologies of heart blocks, but it is just really an analogy for you to recall the different types of heart blocks. Because I just remember when I was learning about the different types of heart blocks, it was usually a bit difficult for me to wrap my head around what's first degree versus second degree versus third degree. So this analogy here that I came up with, which is called the Faucet, that's just me. I just call it the faucet analogy because I'm using a faucet to help me remember what's going on. All right, so on the left hand side here is a rough sketch of the electrical wiring of the heart, and we know normally the impulse starts at the SA node. It would depolarize the atria and then get to the AV node and then down the bundle of His and then through the Purkinje fibers and depolarizing the ventricles and all of that. This here is nothing new, right? But on the right side here, we have drawn a faucet, and it's obviously not the best drawing that you've ever seen, but this is the analogy. So the electrical impulse of the heart could be considered like a faucet, and I find this especially useful to describe heart blocks because it's something you could actually practice right now. So the idea is that by slowly turning off or reducing the flow velocity of the water from the faucet, we could observe the progression of heart blocks as we move from first degree all the way through to third degree. All right, so you experiment with me here. You could go to a faucet and you could turn it on. All right, and obviously, well, this line that I drew here would represent whatever the water is falling into, whether it's the ground, whether it's a basin or a sink or whatever. All right, so let's start. Let's get straight into this. First degree heart blocks. When you just turned on the pipe, the faucet, you're going to be in a turbulent flow. Turbulent flow is going to be coming out from the faucet, and that means everything is just coming, and you're going to see bubbles, and it's probably going to be making a whole set of noise and all of that. What you're trying to achieve in first degree heart blocks is to turn off the tap. Well, not completely off, but decrease the velocity of the water flowing out of the faucet so that you achieve laminar flow, or as close as possible to laminar flow. And this here is a stream that has it's smooth, it's soft, it's quiet, and it's a nice continuous stream with no breaks in between whatsoever. So from the faucet to your collecting container or basin or whatever. So I'll just call this the basin, right? So from the faucet to the basin, there's a nice continuous stream that is flowing. It's very soft. The water itself is very soft. It's very quiet. It's continuous. All right. And as I say, the way we achieve this usually is by decreasing the velocity of the water or turning off the tap. Okay, how is this going to remind you of first degree heart block? Well, this here would represent the faucet itself, would represent electrical activity from the atria. The water itself should represent the electrical activity itself. The water represents the electrical activity or an impulse. All right, and your basin should represent the ventricle. And we know usually in heart blocks there's always some sort of a discrepancy between impulses reaching from the atria to the ventricle. All right, and so a first degree heart block, when you've achieved your laminar flow, is going to tell you that because the way you've had to achieve the laminar flow is by decreasing the velocity or decreasing the electrical impulse from the atria to the ventricle. It reminds us that first degree heart block is prolongation of the PR, or you have prolonged the time that it took the water to reach from the faucet to the basin. And that's how I would remember the first degree heart blocks. All right, so on an ECG, you're going to see prolongation of the PR, and it literally means that the electrical impulse has been prolonged from the atria to get into the ventricle. All right, so that's easy enough. That's first degree heart blocks. And second degree heart blocks, we're still at the faucet. We have to close the tap a bit further, and this allows us to see the second phenomena. And we know the stream is prolonged now, but if we close it a bit further, we start seeing drops. Right? We start seeing drops or discontinuous or breaks at the end of the stream. So I'll put here again the basin, and this is what was once my continuous stream. And just before it hits the basin, there's some breaks to the end. So there was suddenly, before it was continuous, now electrical activity is discontinuous. Electrical activity coming from the atria has now been discontinuous, and there it drops. So that's the big takeaway in second degree heart blocks, is that there are drops. And so drops, discontinuous. And so on an ECG, this would represent some prolongation. So still, in some cases, we could have prolongation and drops. But the takeaway is not the prolongation. So you have drops, and drops equals drops in QRS. And that's the big characteristics of second degree heart blocks. And I emphasis on second degree heart blocks because there are different types of second degree heart blocks. This video here is not so much to describe the different types of second degree heart blocks, but just to tell you that the characteristics of second degree heart blocks, the main characteristics is that there are drops, there's discontinuity from electrical activity from the atria to the ventricle, meaning there are drops sometimes in the QRS. And so this is here, so you can have prolongation and drops. That's a specific type of second degree heart blocks. And then there's the 2-to-1 and all of that, tralala. We're not going into all of that right now, but this is how we remember that if we continue to turn the faucet, we start seeing some discontinuity at the end of the stream, and that would equal to some drops in the QRS complex. Turn your tap off a bit further, and we're still in second degree heart block because now the discontinuous stream disappears, and if I put the basin here, there is just literal drops coming from the faucet. So the stream is no longer there, but they are only drops. So again, we know this is the atria, ventricle, and only drops. So again, characteristic is drops in the QRS. Drops in the QRS. All right, and this is, as I said, a different type of second degree heart block. All right, and third degree heart block, I'm sure you're seeing the pattern here now. Go a bit further in turning the faucet off, and obviously, well, there's nowhere to go from there. There's no other pattern from here. No water comes out of the faucet. This is the atria. ventricle, and so there's no electrical synchrony. Right, so there are no impulses that are getting from the, of course, we call this complete heart block, right? No electrical impulses are getting through from the atria to the ventricles. This doesn't mean that the heart stops. It just means, well, now it's time for the ventricular pacemaker cells to kick into action. So you're still going to see a ventricular response. It's just not going to be carried by the atria. And so we start seeing this discontinuity where the atria contracts and then the ventricle contracts sometimes, and sometimes they both contract together and all of that, right? So so of course the ventricle will continue to beat. It will be run by the pacemaker cells in the ventricle, because the suppressing drive of the SA node / atria is no longer present. And so this is how I remember the different types of heart block with the analogy of a faucet. And as I say, it's something that is actually practical. So if I mean, you don't need to see it 3 or 4 times. It's just something you could do once or twice, observe the phenomena, and it kind of burns into your head. Because all you now have to think about is that what will happen, what is going to happen once I decrease the flow velocity of the water at my faucet, and that's going to show you how the different heart blocks develop. All right, so that's it for this video.